Hey there, members of the night crew, and folks who just love horror. Welcome to the Night Crew podcast, the podcast where we get cozy with the creepy, the frightening, and the just plain undead. I'm your host, Brad Ricks. Now, on today's episode, I sat down with author Zach Ellenberger. We had a great conversation. We talked about writing, talked about some folklore, and how music and history collide with monsters. So, let's hop right on into that virtual studio, shall we? All right, so today in the virtual studio, I'm joined by author Zach Ellenberger. Zach, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, Brad. How you doing?
I am doing well. I did pronounce that right, didn't I?
You did. You nailed it.
Sweet. Yeah,
it's a mouthful, I know.
Well, kind of like when it comes to spelling people's name, when I'm at like author events and I'm like, I don't care what, if you say your name is Tom, I'm going to say like, great, spell it for me.
Yeah.
So as I was saying your name, I was like, I need to make sure I say this right.
No, it's okay. I once worked with a man who truly thought my name was pronounced Zach because it's spelled with a CH at the end.
Right.
And I guess never either saw the spelling of Zach with a CH or it just never occurred to him. And he would go around for the longest time calling me Zach. And I thought it was just him making a private inside joke with me or whatever. And come to find
serious,
out, he was dead serious. I was like, that is not my name, sir.
That's funny.
But yeah, I get it.
Yeah, that's fine. Mine stays nice and easy. So
it's beautiful.
Crisp. The only thing I ever have to worry about, my full name is Bradley. And so, I'll get people that go, do you go by Brad or Bradley? I'm like, it depends. Am I in trouble?
Yep. Same.
Yep. Now, what is funny, anytime I sign books, so I had been signing Bradley forever. And I was like, maybe since Brad Ricks is what's on the cover of my books, I was like,
right.
I'll try to shorten that. Yeah, even by holding my hand to stop, I couldn't do it, and so I'm like, well, screw it. Guess what my signatures say. It's funny because
that was actually something that I was kind of debating even getting in when I first got into writing, just with such a long last name, and I'm just like, I don't really care so much about what I'm known by, but at the same time, when you got a last name that's 11 letters long, it's kind of hard for it to fit all in one space. So you're often already...
Do you sign out each letter, or is it like E with a bunch of squiggles?
It's really E with a bunch of squiggles when I do it, I usually
5 letters and I do the same damn thing.
Right. You want to keep it as illegible as possible because that's how the better it looks, right? Gives it more aesthetic, I guess.
Exactly. It works for doctors.
Yeah, exactly. If you can sign my prescription with that dribble, then I can sign a book with the same.
Damn straight. All right. So, starting out on a nice little fun note, this should be a fun interview. This is going to be great. All right. So, all right. Well, so I guess tell me a little bit about your writing career. How long have you been writing? What was your first book? And what made you want to become a writer?
Yeah. Good questions. I really started taking it serious, I guess, around 2019. And I released my first book in December of 2020, which was a historical fiction called Potato Kingdom. And it was kind of, I guess, where it all came from. Okay, long story short is, for me personally, I do really enjoy history. I guess you can call me a history buff, but just an avid lover of history. So that, I guess, was kind of my entry point when it came to storytelling. And also just, watching a lot of movies and stuff and watching those historical movies and thinking like, God, there's just so many good stories within history itself that if they would just focus on that and tell those stories, there would be just endless amounts of material to work with. So that was just kind of the motivation, I guess, for me in getting into actual long form story, right? Storytelling and writing. When I started out as a musician and I was a guitarist and playing in bands and stuff. So I wrote music and lyrics, and that was kind of like, I guess, my first taste of doing like creative writing, stuff like that. And eventually, around 2019, when it was, started settling down, doing less of the music thing, is when I started picking up the writing. Because I guess for one, I always told myself that before I die, I want to be able to write a book, whatever form that came, was not really necessary. It was just, like one of those bucket list items, like, one day before I die, I'd like to be able to write a book. Turned out it came a lot quicker than I was expecting. Cause I don't plan on dying tomorrow, but, I had this idea for a story that I thought was, in my mind, was a fairly decent story to tell. So that's what became my first novel, which I self-published in 2020. And from then I've kind of been just, like you, just hitting the road and try, figuratively with writing and trying to, pump out as much as I can, content wise and stories. I guess outside of my novel, I started with short stories. And I guess that was kind of like when I'm not focusing on trying to get a full story out. Short stories, I guess, was where my go-to was, because getting a few thousand words in and out of a story was, the easy part for me. Mm-hmm. But then obviously expanding, that's when the real difficulty came, the real challenge came for me. But that was kind of where I got started with it all. And again, a long time fan of history, but also horror as well. And that was also the majority of my writing as well. Horror in most forms, but particularly historical, kind of the Gothic style of horror, which was just what I kind of grew up on. I had an older brother that showed me a lot of horror movies as a kid, so I was also tainted with that experience and trauma that I'm sure many other writers have experienced themselves.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So in the short stories that you do, the horror short stories, so do you mix in some historical into those stories?
Yeah. I guess that's always my drive a lot of the time with my stories, my horror stories. But I guess all of my stories, really. Most of my stories, again, are kind of driven and motivated by cryptid stories, or those kind of small anecdotes that you hear. A lot of my stories being built on certain folklore from parts of the world, particularly Slavic, Native American, even vampires, but also trying to take it from a more historical view. I mean, as much as I enjoy the fantastical and all that, I'm always kind of really driven by the reality of situations, and like to try and limit the fantasy of it. I think it just kind of gives it a more immersive feel to a story sometimes.
People can probably relate more to a realistic setting versus something that's more fantastical.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, it was kind of, funny enough, I do kind of always try to keep some type of historical or factual element to a story. I want people to learn something. I guess that's, just being my own self-aggrandizing, and it's like you're going to learn something while you read my material. But and one of the things the new projects I've kind of been working on lately is just an anthology of historical horror. That's each story kind of specifically focused on some type of period with elements of horror across all kinds of periods. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So you said you started in doing music and songwriting, that kind of stuff. How have you seen that has played into your writing, especially from a short story standpoint?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I guess that's kind of, again, that was the sort of the path into the short storytelling, because when I was writing music, you're working in a very lyrical, poetic structure. And for me, hearing music a lot is, I enjoy the music to have, again, a story. I'm just kind of that person that's always hounding about what the story is and just what it's telling. And not that it has to be something profound, but just, something that tells a clear message for the most part, and gets the point across. But, through lyric and song, I guess, was kind of, that shoe into short story formatting. And, I guess also as well, influences of horror. I was big into metal and punk, obviously still am. So that kind of, I think, translated again into the type of writing I gravitate towards. So yeah, I would say that. And it's always tough to really, because I'll still dabble with my music every once in a while now, but it's so much less like when I used to do it full time. It was always to do it with a purpose, kind of like what your writing is nowadays. I'm sure is when you're sitting down, it's like, all right, I got to get something complete, and I got to get a point across, or just make progress on something. And it was kind of the way I was with music. And luckily nowadays I'm a little bit less harsh on myself, and just to kind of let it become a stress reliever again, rather than a chore or a responsibility. So it kind of comes full circle in that it's the thing to kind of wind me down and calm me from the craziness of trying to write stories.
Yeah, so my background is kind of very similar to yours in that I also came from doing music. I'm a guitar player and a singer. Awesome. I did songwriting. Nice. And I know one thing that how having that musical background kind of helped in my writing is that, with songs and songwriting, every word is there for a reason and a purpose.
Yes, that's a good point. That's a very good point.
And so it's, you take that same kind of discipline in writing, and you putting it into whether it's short stories or novels and stuff. And that, if something is there, it's like, I put it there for a reason. It's purposeful, it's intentional in what it is. Similar to like in a song, if you have very limited, space or beats or count, it needs to be there for a specific reason.
Exactly. And when you're looking at, you're exactly right. It's everything has to sort of have a purpose, and you only get a small amount of space.
You can't have a whole bunch of filler words in a song.
Right. Exactly. You hear those songs that just has too much going on, and it, and you can hear it, where it's just just way too much happening, I guess you could say. And when it comes, and you can see that in writing too, where there's just a lot being crammed in, stories being diluted, whatever it is. But in that way, you have to be very purposeful with your notes as well as words. So yeah, I would absolutely agree with that.
So where do you find inspiration for your stories?
I think again, it draws me back to history. There's such great stories that come out of history, but also, in as much as current events, I always try to keep an eye out for small things that kind of just trigger a thought or a line of thought that kind of gets me feeling inspired about something. But again, it's really a lot of the time I end up looking at history and I catch something that's just like, wow, that's really wild. And just how the human condition can kind of interpret things to be so fanatical and extreme. And I guess that's kind of the draw again for me in history is, where we stand today, and we have so much explanation and understanding about, science in general, that 200, 300 years ago, someone would have looked at it and went, that's witchcraft right there. That's absolutely nuts what you're saying. You're the devil. And that's, and on such large scales, it becomes something that's just so interesting to me from just a kind of, I guess, sociological view. One of the things that I've kind of been circling lately that's so intriguing to me was the dancing plague of 1518. It was, I don't know if you've heard of it before, but there was
yes.
A mass event, a mass kind of hallucination, they called it, where all of these people in Strasbourg, France, suddenly just started dancing in the streets. And it seemed so harmless at first, but they danced exhaustively day and night until people started collapsing dead. And they started thinking people were possessed and that it was just this massive I'm forgetting what the actual phrase is, but one of these kind of just these sociological events that remain unexplained to this day, but you have so many different explanations behind it, whether it was some type of drug influence, if they had poisoned food and drink with ergot, or if there had been just a mass hallucination that actually occurred. And it's something that, like I said, still to this day, people are unsure of what the cause was. And that, I think, is the kind of fascinating side for all of it for me, is that how things like that, even how small they exist in the greater expanse of history, can carry such a profound impact in just the human psyche.
Yeah. When you're talking about, those different, possible reasonings, but we don't know and all that, it reminds me, there's a show on the History Channel that I love watching called History's Greatest Mysteries.
Oh, nice. And, yes. I was a big History Channel fan.
Yeah. So it's Lawrence Fishburne, I think, is the one who's the host of that one. But it looks at different events in history and it's like, okay, here's possible reason 1, possible reason 2, everything from looking at Roswell to, is Atlantis real? Yeah, but all kind of different things throughout history, even down to like the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. And it takes a bunch of events throughout history and looking at different either causes or things like that. So it's not that I'm pitching for the History Channel, although if you'd like to be a sponsor, but
press sponsor ad now.
But so as you were saying that, with some of the different reasoning, it made me think of that. But you could take. I can definitely see where you can take one, different possible scenarios of what caused stuff, and you give it a nice little twist to it, and definitely can turn into a good scary story real quick.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So it's kind of what my drive is, those little anecdotes that just kind of stand out in the weirdest ways.
Yeah.
So
what do you find is the most difficult part of writing a book or short story or?
I would say the smaller, minute details, which some might say kind of the filler parts of stories. But again, you want to make every story, every conversation count. I've always been really good about plotting the overarching story, the overarching plot. And I've always been pretty comfortable in coming up with good story premises, but getting to the conflict and developing the resolution, getting into that second and third act area has always been really tough for me because, I always want to try and kind of throw out a lot of different, I guess, different options to use, kind of different Chekhov's guns that I can kind of bring back around to help tell that story. But, if they're not there in the first place, or if I'm just kind of struggling in that first act already, then I'm not going to even, be able to come around. So it's really getting that second to third act leg and trying to, just pump out whatever I feel is coming through on it, whether or not I'm questioning it or not.
When you talk, and you said you kind of started talking about doing small details, and I guess especially if you're doing historical kind of things, it's kind of in the details where people can. If you're someone who is very familiar with an event and you're reading something and you're like, you could very easily get taken out of the story.
Sure.
If you just kind of make up a detail and they go, they wouldn't have had a dye of that color during that time frame. And so now suddenly you're out of the reader's out of the story, which is what you don't want.
Exactly.
So I can definitely see where, especially in doing more historical type stuff, that having those small details can make a big difference.
Yeah. And particularly with the first novel that I had done, which I had really kind of put the workload on myself right off the bat, because it's a story about two Irish brothers who end up on opposite sides of the Civil War. And I wanted the story to be as real as possible while the characters were obviously still fictitious. So while the one brother who was on the northern side, I wanted to have him be kind of right in the trenches of it all as part of, the Irish Brigade, the Fighting 69th, while the other brother was also on the Confederate side, along with a lot of the Irish regiments that were there as well, because there were Irish regiments on the Confederate side. So, and what I wanted it to be was basically, I wanted it to be as real as it could be. So that in a way that it was kind of grabbing the reader by the belt buckle and just pulling them into the fire with the character. So it was a lot of time spending researching the actual battles and the movements of the regiments across the battlefield, where they were deployed, where they ended, obviously the outcome dictating where they ended. And it was very exhausting, but at the same time, it was something that I wanted to be very true to form in a historical sense, so that the reader would be basically compelled to, go Google the character and maybe learn something and realize, oh, this character actually isn't real. Well, every other character that they essentially communicate and interface with was a real historical person. So that was kind of where the small details for me really kind of lend a lot of support and credence to the writing overall.
Yeah, as actually about to use that exact same word, credence. Yeah, it does. It gives it some kind of some solidity to it. That this,
solidity or validation or something.
Right. So although this character doesn't exist, everything happening around them did.
Exactly. So
gotcha. All right. So who would you say are some of your biggest literary influences?
I am hands down. I'm a really big Poe fan.
Love something around Poe. It's usually one of the first ones I list as well.
Yeah, and I can't deny that. Obviously, people will probably hear that and be like, "Oh, Poe, that's such an easy name drop, cop out, whatever." But I mean, and especially coming from again a musical, poetic beginning, and really enjoying that Gothic romanticism. I mean, that was all him, really. And that was, again, my first influence. Him, Robert Louis Stevenson, the early birds of that type of horror. One of my favorite stories is a Ambrose Bierce short story. The incident on, I think it's Owl Creek Bridge, if I'm remembering the name correctly. And that is, that was just kind of where I got, and it's funny. It's one of those reads you probably read in high school, junior high and stuff, things that teachers would make you read. And while most of my other classmates were like, God, I'm so tired of this stuff. It's so boring. I'm just like, I'm like at home and I'm enjoying myself. So
like, I don't know what you are complaining about.
Yeah. I don't know what you're complaining about, but I mean, even into more modern stuff. I guess one of the best things that has come out of doing this and being part of the indie writing community is the community in and of itself, and being able to read a lot of other people's work, because obviously there's a lot of really good stories that aren't going to get the same amount of exposure as these Stephen Kings and Clive Barker and all these other big name people out there, Gillian Flynn and stuff. And there's just a lot of great material in it that's very accessible. And in a way that you're directly supporting someone else's work and their ventures. And it's great because it's been really supportive, and I've enjoyed every minute of it.
It's an awesome community being part of the indie world.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been amazing.
So I've had a lot of great influence, I guess, coming out of that community lately. So that's been a lot of what I've been reading. So I recently started Desiree Horton's most recent novel, What Comes Between. I have Dev Solovey's Fever Dreams novella in my lineup. And then I have, I actually also started The King in Yellow by Robert Chambers, which was probably a mistake to try and do two books at once, because I can't do that. I'm a very bad reader. I reread lines over and over again. And if I could read with a ruler, I would. It would help me tremendously, but nevertheless, I'm a slow reader. So
I can do more than one book as long as the themes are not similar. I was doing an arc read for one author, and then a book club that I was in was we were doing a different book, but both of them were about hauntings, and there were I'd pick up the one and I was like, wait, what book am I reading again? And these are way too close.
Yeah.
Not that the stories themselves were. It's just the theme of both of them being hauntings. Is I remember even when we were later on in that book club, we were talking about the book, and like I started bringing up stuff. I was like, "Oh crap, that wasn't in this book, was it?" Like, whoops.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's the smart thing to do. You gotta keep your brain compartmentalized with the genres.
Yeah, if it was two different genres, like if I was reading I used to do a lot of stuff in the tech world, and so if I was reading a instructional manual or a certification exam manual, but I could read that learning studying for an exam at the same time as I'm reading a Stephen King book or something like that, so I could keep those two separate and be reading them at the same time. But yeah, if it was like two different stories that both have to do with werewolves or something like that, nope.
It's not gonna work. Yeah, that's a smart way to do it. So in the you talk about in the indie world and all that. So if you could pick someone to do a collaboration with, who would you like to collaborate with? Oh man, there's a lot of really good people that I've been eyeing out there. One of them in the actually in the Chicago area, who I've really been seeing a lot of, and I've been itching to try and get some of her work is, and I apologize if I pronounced the name wrong, but Cynthia Pelayo, I believe is the pronunciation of it. Horror writer based out of Chicago here, and while I haven't gotten to read any of her work yet, read a lot of the, story plots and everything behind it. It sounds like something that's just, up my alley, and, just getting the opportunity to work with someone here in the Chicago area, has a little bit of familiarity with where I'm at. Who else? Oh, there's so many people. Well, I mean, funny enough, I was going to say I wanted, looking forward to be able to work with Jerry Blaze, but we actually just did an anthology recently last month that we released. So, I did, get to work with a few recently that were kind of like crossing off bucket lists. And I'm actually in the process with Bainham on working through an upcoming series with a ton of their writers. And I know I mentioned to you Carrietta Dorsch before we got started. And so I definitely looking forward to getting to work with her too. I
got a chance to meet her at AuthorCon. So.
Did you?
Awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah. I would have, like I said, I really wish I would have had the opportunity to go there. And I have to look up another name because I've been, I'm blanking on it at the moment. And I wanted to be able to at least give that name drop. C.P. Bearden. I'm not fully sure what his first name is, but I know he goes by C.P. Bearden with his writing. I followed him a lot on social media, and he definitely seems like someone with a similar taste and background from what I came from. And so I definitely would look forward to having an opportunity to get to work with him too. So awesome. And there's so many great people out there that have so much going on. It's tough to even try and name drop at this moment.
Yeah, the indie world is definitely, it's filled with some really great authors.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so now shifting gears a little bit. So my little spiel that I'm doing is so I started the Night Crew podcast as a spinoff to my own series, The Night Crew, which is about a team of monster hunters. all of my scripted episodes are deep dives into some kind of creature. For instance, right now I'm doing a series on vampires, which I'm certain by the time this episode comes out, I still will be.
All right.
With that being said, one of the caveats of coming on the podcast is you've got to talk about your favorite monster. So, Zach, what is your favorite horror creature or monster?
My favorite horror creature / monster. I'm a big fan of the Wendigo.
Ooh.
I did a short that kind of hovered around the monster character being a Wendigo type character, but I always really liked the Wendigo cryptid, or I guess you could say folklore. It's a Native American folklore monster.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit because Wendigo not being as common as, say, if it was like aliens. So tell the audience a little bit about the Wendigo.
Right. Okay. So yeah, the Wendigo is a supernatural creature from Native American folklore. I think more specifically out of the northeastern regions, mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. But it was sort of a cannibalistic type monster. It would consume flesh. It would it had the ability to, I think, transform in ways from sort of a humanoid form to this monstrous kind of creature.
Some kind of shapeshifter.
Yeah, a little bit, and just this
shapeshifter kind of.
Yes, and kind of a forest lurker creature, wild, animalistic, almost kind of like a wolf in a way. That was always my bag.
Gotcha. So you said you have a story that where you've done a story where you have one?
Yeah, it was, and it was kind of inspired pretty much by the Wendigo, and it was one of my first publications that I had gotten. It was called The Resurrectionist, and it was about a graveyard watchman who sells dead bodies to a professor for scientific research. And a body goes missing one night, and he's kind of being haunted by this ghost with what he believes to be some kind of like creature that's stealing the bodies. And the ghost is leading him towards secrets within the town that reveals a lot. but yeah, I've always, and it's, I guess that kind of the folklore angle is always something that I've enjoyed, because also on the opposite side of the world, you have one of the other mythical, I wouldn't so much call him a creature. I guess you could call him a creature, a monster. If you've ever heard of Koschei the Deathless.
I have not.
He is a figure from Slavic Ukrainian folklore, where he's sort of this old man type creature that's, again, who's undead. And he, if I remember this tales, it's sort of like, it reflects kind of like this damsel in distress type story where he steals this prince's girl and he tries to save her, but he kills the prince by chopping him up, and he somehow it's crazy folklore, Hans Christian Andersen type stuff. Whatever. Look it up though. Koschei the Deathless. A great mythological figure worth checking out. But yeah, those are kind of the ones that really grab my attention.
Gotcha. Any good movies that you know of that you would recommend from a Wendigo standpoint?
Whew.
Any instance where Hollywood has done it decent?
Man, that's a good question. I can't really think of any movies that come to mind that has a specific reference to Wendigo. I know there's bound to be some. There's a few movies that always kind of comes to mind with sort of, I guess, there is one that comes to mind with that type of archetype. I don't know if you ever saw The Ritual on Netflix.
Yes, it's been a while, but yes.
Yeah. It's obviously more steeped in Norse folklore and mythology, but it has that feel of the type of Wendigo when they're being stalked by the creature in the woods. I really like that one. That was a good movie, but yeah, I don't know of any that have done a take on the Wendigo from my knowledge.
I would say there was an early Supernatural episode where they were hunting a Wendigo.
Okay.
And so, and I say early, I want to say it was like season 1, 2, before they got into a lot of the whole angels and demons and all the other kind of stuff, into the world stuff. So I want to say there was an early episode where they were hunting one.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, that's going to plague me because I feel like there was something
files out there too.
Yeah, I know probably some TV spot or something. But I know there was something out there that really kind of caught my attention about the Wendigo in the first place. That again just drew me and inspired me to end up writing a story around it. So, and that's all how it always ends up coming around. I guess for me, it's something small that goes, "Ooh, that's kind of cool. I want to run with that." So it's always kind of spur of the moment.
Nice.
But,
and then I know I want to say it came out last year. There was so in the indie worlds, Will Gray, he had a book called Our Father's Burden that is, it talks about it's Wendigo is it's kind of the cryptid that's in that. So,
okay. Our Father's Burden.
Yeah. Our Father's Burden.
I'll have to look that one up. Yeah. That sounds good.
So, all right. So let's see. So outside of writing, and I know we talked about music too, but what are some of your hobbies?
Yeah, I mean, doing the music thing. Like I said, I still do it here and there. I humor myself doing a bit of recording here and there. I also do my own podcast currently. I do a podcast with Dev Solovey and my brother Sean called Party Bonus. It's a kind of sketch comedy podcast. It's really kind of just a podcast about stories and storytelling. So we'll do a bunch of, it's kind of, humor forward. And we'll do a bunch of different sketches, but I think kind of our main focus, what we do is we'll improvise a story off the cuff. We'll start with kind of a story premise. We'll choose from a few that we came up with prior, and we'll pick one and we'll try to improvise a story from start to end within an hour while using a bit of a mad-lib approach. We call them rad-libs. So we'll improvise the story, and at certain segments of the story, we'll stop and we'll draw a random object or phrase or whatever to try and help the story or to add into the story. And we got to kind of, riff on that and improvise and take it from there. And it's just kind of, it's a fun type of podcast. It's meant for laughs and stuff. So it keeps things interesting. We get a good crack out of it. But yeah, that's Party Bonus, our podcast. And outside of that, I watch way too much TV normally, and I play video games, right? But I also try to complement that by hiking. I do like being outdoors, surprisingly, and getting a bit of fresh air instead of being around the city so much. That's usually. Those are usually my hobbies. I keep them pretty simple for the most part, I'd say.
Awesome. All right. So, besides, I know, you have stuff on Amazon, but where else can people find you, if they want to learn more about you?
So aside from, books are on Amazon. You can check out the podcast Party Bonus on any of the podcast listening platforms you have. I have a website you can check out, zachellenberger.weebly.com. There's also a link tree you can search me on. But other than that, I believe that's everywhere. You can find some of my stuff on Smashwords as well. I believe that pretty much sums up everything I can.
All right. Yeah. And we'll, any of the links and stuff, I'll have you send me those, and I'll put those in the show notes so that,
cool.
Anybody, all 2 or 3 of my listeners, will be able to see them in the show notes and, be able to click and find your stuff so we can, hopefully, get you some sales and, get more people to learn about Zach.
Hey, right. Let's just spread that indie love, get that community going.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So, any lasting, words or comments you want to leave the audience with before we sign off?
No. All I know is I also have Fear Not the Dead in my lineup too to read. That's Brad's book. If anyone doesn't know that already, so that is also on my reading list to get to. And other than that, no. I'm looking forward to just keep meeting people. I make silly videos and stuff, so go check it out and comment on it. Follow me as I do stupid shit, excuse me, stuff, and otherwise try and survive.
Yeah, I think that's what we all try to do is
just
do stupid shit and try to survive.
Right, just go out there and survive. Make good decisions and go survive, please.
All right. So again, with that, so we'll put I'll put the links in the show notes. Zach, it's been a pleasure having you on. I appreciate chatting with you for a little while.
Thank you so much, Brad. I've appreciated being here as well.
All right. That's it for the Night Crew podcast and my conversation with Zach Ellenberger. I have links to where you can find Zach in the show notes. Follow him on all the socials and definitely pick up his books. And check out his storytelling podcast, Party Bonus. So if you had a good time, make sure to follow the show, share it with a friend, and leave a rating. Hopefully 5 stars. If you want updates on my writing, you can follow me on Facebook or TikTok at Bradrick's Author. You can find copies of my novels wherever you like to buy books. But if you hop over to my website, bradricks.com, you can purchase signed copies of any of my novels. While there, also sign up for my newsletter. Remember, the Night Crew Book 1 is currently available, and Book 2 comes out in November. I'm Brad Ricks, reminding you to stay out of graveyards after dark, question people who don't show up in mirrors, and make sure to avoid the dancing plague. I've seen some of you dance. We don't need to repeat of that. Until next time, keep your curtains drawn, your sense of humor sharp, and your blood inside your body. Thanks for listening.